I am Max Wayne Fisher. I served in the Navy from 1969 to 1973. It set the groundwork for my career as a tugboat captain. Summer of 67. I went swimming in the plantation canals with buddies of mine. At the time, I was already diving for the high school team, so I was pretty good at getting close to the springboard on my dives. Long story short, we climbed this 37-foot pine tree, and it had like a stage built up on it that we would jump off and dive into the canal. Well, my error was I did a reverse 1.5, went head first into 4.5 foot of water. This, needless to say, kind of messed me up. Called my mother and had her come check me out. When she got there, he said, "Oh, he's okay," and she grabbed my arm and lifted me up. When she did, my right eye popped out of my head, literally, and my neck made a real loud crunching sound. So when I woke up in the emergency room, they were already putting the pins around my head and putting me into body traction. This prevented me from playing any more future sports in high school whatsoever. Being the spoiled brat that I was, I said, if I can't play sports, I'm not going to go to school. And the dean needlessly said, well, if you're not going to go to school, what are you going to do? And I laughed and said, I'm going to join the Navy. After signing all the paperwork, I signed up for what they called the kiddie cruise from 17 to 21. And that's how I got into the Navy. After I completed boot camp, I went in, I believe it was in September 68. And I completed boot camp around November because I went straight from Orlando, NTC, to Parris Island. At Parris Island, I took up some courses in marksmanship and came out of there with my marksman. I qualified on the Thompson. I qualified on the 45. And I had a few other little extra additives. Long story short, they ended up sticking me on board a ship called the USS Severn, AO 61. I reported on board this ship, and they had me go on to a deck crew. That particular winter, we were painting the numbers on the side of the bow of the ship. And the way to do that was to put a stage overboard and tie it off and climb down and paint the numbers. Well, my bosun mate that was in charge of our crew was trying to lower the stage a little bit, but he didn't have any help. When he slacked it off, I went for a swim into the ice in Newport, Rhode Island, which again sticks me back into a hospital for a little while. Next thing I know, I'm taking the test for the gunner's mate, which seemed natural. I already had the marksmanship, so I took that and I passed the test for gunner's mate. Navy was exciting. I got to go around the world a couple of times. I got to see a lot of things. But those were the good days. Those were fun times, really. Eventually, I got into a little one time too many jumping ship. one or too many times getting caught jumping ship and restriction, and eventually had to go through a court martial. They sent me back to Rhode Island, where I finished out my last few months actually as a corpsman again, but I was working at the morgue at the Rhode Island Hospital, and that was probably the greatest duty of my life. If they'd left me alone, I would have been a lifer there. After I got out of the service, I came home. My family had moved from Fort Lauderdale to Satellite Beach. When I got home, I eventually joined a little college called Brevard Community College. It was fun. It's where I met my wife. I was working on the Osceola, which was a 220 steamboat on the outside of the park. We used it for night cruises and dinner cruises. I went from deck to chief engineer, I guess you could call it. From there, I went on up to captain, and I enjoyed it. It was a great job. I had taken Deb there one night and made the poor mistake of telling this young girl that I just met that I was going to marry her. Long story short, it happened. After we got married, we needlessly need to have jobs and money. And after going through a few different job titles, loan officer, and a few other things that I tried, I ended up working at a morgue again. That was fun. Then all of a sudden, Mr. Baldwin and my uncle had somehow convinced me to come to Mobile and go to work on a dredge called the Dredge Gull. This is an oyster shell dredge. And again, I worked my way up from deckhand, cook, chute operator, and that's about as far as I really went there. By the time I made chute operator, I'd seen these boats going by pushing barges, tank barges. And I managed to be talking to the captain one night when one was going by us, and I asked him what that was all about and what kind of money it paid. He told me how to get involved in getting my tankerman's license. Well, so be it. I went into the Coast Guard station when I got off the boat, talked to the Coast Guard. They gave me a comic book, literally a comic book, 25 pages long. Told me to read that, come back in and take the test for a tankerman. All right, I took the test, aced it, came back out. They gave me what was known at the time, comically known as a D grade tankerman's ticket. What this allowed me to do was to pump oil from one barge to another. Only oil, nothing else. I didn't know anything about the chemical aspect yet. A company called National Marine invited me to come in to Houston, and they had actually paid first class round trip ticket from Mobile to Houston to come in and interview. When I got there and showed them my D class ticket, everybody in the office was kind of shocked because they never saw anything that low of a grade. And long story short, the HR department sent me back to the Coast Guard station with a letter from them saying they wanted me to be upgraded to a B class ticket. So again, they gave me another cartoon book, which I read. Took the test all on the same day. Walked out of the Coast Guard station that afternoon with a B-class tankerman's ticket. Went back to the Houston Natural Gas Company, which was known as National Marine. They hired me on the spot as a B-class tankerman. And from there, I moved my way on up. Within about 2 years, I made it to steersman. After I made steersman, they sent me to Piney Point, Maryland, where I sat and learned all about being a wheelman. Actually, what it was about was navigation, rules of the road, general navigation. In that class, there was roughly 27 fellows. Out of that class, 3 of us passed the test at the end of the course. Union decided they were going to keep me to help get other young men through and pass their exams. So I got to stay as an instructor for Piney Point. They had me as a deck instructor, then they also had me as a navigation officer to help pass these guys through. That lasted maybe a few months. I had the opportunity where National Marine was trying to break up the Union. So when I left the Union, I ended up going to a little company called Alamo Barge Line, lovingly called the Wine Line. The reason for the nickname is we went around to bars and literally shanghaied guys to become deckhands. We'd go to a bar and get drunk with somebody and say, hey, you want a job? Yeah, I want to get it, And everybody's all excited. So we drag them back to the boat, put them on the boat. Most of the time we had to go to Kmart the next day to buy them some clothes, some boots, and other minor details. At any rate, Wine Line was known very famously just because of that. I went from steersman to pilot pretty quick with Alamo. They kept me as a pilot for about 2 years. One afternoon, coming into Celanese in Bayport, I was on watch coming in during a storm, and I had missed the docking, coming in on a dock. Needless to say, I did about $8,000 worth of concrete damage on the dock and dented up a barge. Assuming that I was fired, I went down, packed up my bag, and sure enough, a man named Jim Heidler came and picked me up. Didn't say a word. We drove from Celanese back into Houston to Channelview to a little dock known as Channelview Musgrove Fleet. When we got there, Jim had pointed to a boat was quite a bit bigger than what I was accustomed to. Said, you see that boat? And I said, yes, sir. He says, you're captain on there. Pick your crew and name them, and you're the boss. Being completely confused, I did remind him that I just finished tearing a dock down. And he laughed and said, yep, do you intend to do that again? And I said, no, sir, I sure don't. He says, well, a good pilot's not going to do something twice in a row, is he? I said, well, I sure hope I'm that pilot. He says, no. He says, I hope you're that captain. Kind of shocked me a little bit, but all right, fine. I jumped on a little boat that was known as the Mamaroo. It was a little bit bigger than what I was accustomed to. It was a 600 horsepower. We had 2 barges that we were pushing from Corpus Christi to Taylor's Bayou, Port Arthur. I had that run for roughly maybe another 2, 3 years. From there on, I did nothing but move up bigger and better. Every time I made a move, we had one heck of an increase in pay. I went from mom and pop companies to great big companies. And eventually I went back down to the mom and pop companies because they treat you better. They treat you like you're, an individual. My final company turned out to be Hards Marine. 2016, January was my last day. I was having issues getting up and down the boat. Had issues with health. And the Coast Guard, they weren't very cordial about giving you your 10th issue. So that ended my career on the boats. It was great. I love it. I miss it. I miss all the guys that I had helped train. I hear from them quite often through Facebook and sometimes the phone call. But here I am, retired, done with boats. I guess at 68, that's not so bad.